If you're in private practice, there's probably a pretty good chance that you want to get any patient that walks in the door because that's why you opened. You wanted to help people. But I'll bet you there's something maybe nagging in the back of your mind that says, do I really have to see every patient that walks in the door? Or can I try to specialize even more than the specialist that I am? Well, today's guest is doing that, and he's going to walk us through how he got to that point and give us some tips on how you can try to see more of the patients you really want to see rather than all those that happen to walk in the door. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want, but I really believe that care is better when it's just you and your provider, and nobody else is secretly whispering in the provider's ear what their agenda is. Not a hospital or a health system or other owners in faraway lands, just you and your provider. And today, my guest is Dr. David Kading. David is an optometrist and owner of Specialty Eye with 3 offices in the Seattle area. But growing up in landlocked South Dakota prompted him to follow his passion for eye care to the West Coast, where he breathed in the salty ocean air and attended Pacific University College of Optometry in Portland, Oregon, graduating with his Doctor of Optometry degree. In addition to treating patients, Dr. Kading is active in various dry eye contact lens and contact lens solution research studies. He's a consultant and key opinion leader for several eye care manufacturers. He writes articles and has performed hundreds of lectures nationally and internationally on the topics of keratoconus, irregular corneas, dry eye, anterior segment disease, contact lenses, contact lens solutions, and practice management. David, you are clearly a busy guy, and I appreciate you taking some time to come on to PracticeCare.
Absolutely my pleasure, Carl.
It's good to have you. So let's start with where I start with a lot of guests. I read your bio, but fill in some more of your background for us so that we can get to know you a bit better.
Yeah, so I came out to the West Coast to do graduate school, as you pointed out, and I had 2 intentions, one to graduate and one to not date a classmate. Well, I failed at the second one, and I ended up marrying a classmate, moved us up to Washington. And over the last 15 years or so, we've bought 3 practices and just fulfilling what we want out of practice. It's been perfect for our family as we can decide what we want to do and, how my wife and I work. I went on a field trip the other day. It was great to be able to take some time out. And that's the beauty about private practice. It
Yeah.
also has allowed me to consult with a lot of medical companies and help them in their marketing and how to reach out. And then I love sharing like you do. I have 2 podcasts. One's called the Myopia podcast and one's called the Optometric Insights podcast. And it's just a pleasure to get to be here with you and share with your audience.
It's good to have you. We don't have too many guests that have the rounded background that you do, you see the private practice, you see the other side. So it's really great. And we're going to talk about a marketing topic, which is, do you, I won't say in a very marketing jargony way, but do you have to see every patient who walks in the door? And when I go onto your website and check out your practice, at first blush, it looks like you're set up to see just about any patient with any kind of eye problem, right? You have a wide variety of services to offer. You've got the optician center. You accept a wide variety of insurance. That would say to anybody who's looking at it, well, they must want me, right? I have an eye problem or my eye itches or whatever it is. But what you have figured out, not only sort of mentally, but how to do is, well, there's certain patients we really want to treat more than others. And so I guess I'd like to start with, what are some of those that you'd like to see more than others? And how did you arrive at the, we're not getting the patient population we really kind of want?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our patients, are making that 20%, and the 20%
Mm-hmm.
are making the 80%. And that also goes into the mental capacity and the frustration, right? So, how are we able to set up the practice to see the patients that we want to see? What are the stop gaps that are keeping the patients that we want to see so that we see more of them? And what are the things that are driving everyone into the practice that maybe we're not the best practice for them. For example, in eye care, there's a lot of people who are looking for really low cost alternatives. They want to go online and buy their glasses, as an example to that. And they're not really particular, evidenced by the fact that they may go buy a product, somewhere else. Well, that is a low cost patient to me. And it also tells me that they don't value the recommendations that I may provide to them, right?
Right.
So we think about something like glasses, but then what if that patient has a serious disease? How serious are they going to be at taking my recommendations? And so, not that we avoid patients like that, not that we're pushing them away, but if I had a chance to shout to the world, hey, we want you here, who are the people that we were saying we really want? We'll see anybody and take care of anybody. But if I have a chance to shout to the world, come into my practice, there's
Yeah.
specific people that I really want to do that. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty about marketing. That's our way of shouting to a crowd of people, hey, if you're like this is who we want to see.
Right. So it's not saying you there, stay away. It's saying you over there, please come in. And it,
Right.
it starts to sort itself out. So how long were you in practice before this idea started to hit you of the population that I see in a typical week or month is not it's not what I want to be seeing.
Yeah. So, in our first year of practice, when my wife and I bought our first location, it was like, get anybody in the door and fill the schedule as full as we can get it. And, something ends up starting to happen when you start seeing a full schedule. And that is that your revenue per patient starts going down as your schedule gets way busier. The amount of time that you can personalize towards that patient, making more specific recommendations. I'll give you an example in eye care is so many of our patients spend an exorbitant amount of time on their computer, and most of them would
No
be
way.
far better. Yeah, I know. Most of them would be far better suited by a pair of glasses designated for computer use. But if you just come in and you need new glasses, and I just do, here's your glasses, and then you walk out the door, because I didn't have time to share with you the value proposition of here's something that could also help you,
Mm-hmm.
or your eyes are a little bit dry. Let's start treating that disease. If I don't have time for that,
Yeah.
then I may make a baseline revenue from that patient and I'm rushing through it. That doesn't give me personal satisfaction. It doesn't give the patient the best care, and it also doesn't generate the best revenue. So the longer I can spend with a patient and really help them through the struggles that they're having, the more value they'll see, the more money they'll see, and the better off they'll be.
Yeah.
And so we started realizing that as our schedule started to get fuller. And, we're always wanting to see more patients. But when we do, we've noticed that the revenue that we're generating per patient is so I'd rather see half the patients and have them generate twice the revenue. And we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it because that evidence of higher dollar amount spent by patient means that they are seeing more value to what we're providing them, right? That's the capitalistic society that we live in, is people pay for things that they want.
Well, that's nothing different about that terribly than even in the consumer world. Luxury brands are less price sensitive than
Right.
value brands. People just don't look at it as much, but
Right.
they do come in with a more definitive opinion of what they expect from it, I think,
Yeah.
than on the value brands.
I think in healthcare, when you start talking about more money, many people think that, oh, well, you're a doctor.
It's
You should be
evil.
trying to help take
Yeah.
care of people. It's evil, right? But if my doctor sits and talks with me for a half hour and explains things more to me, I'm more likely to take the medication, to go with the particular service or procedure that they're recommending for me, rather
Yeah.
than them just saying, hey, you got this problem, you need this, go search it on the internet, right?
Right.
And so we decided to, after about a year or two in practice, that we didn't want to see every patient. And then it's taken a long time, but we've just worked to self-select
Hmm.
and weed out some of the patients that we decided might not be as fitting for our practice.
And let me clarify a couple of things that you were saying. So you said,
Please.
because there's a little marketing math in here. So one of them was revenue per patient. When you say we don't want a full schedule, do you mean that you don't want to, you want time gaps in your day, or you want to see, let's say you saw 20 patients a day, you'd rather see 10. It's still as much treatment time, but it's more treatment time per patient. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and most of us in the world of healthcare would love a patient schedule of 10 and be able to generate the
I
revenue,
just
but
grabbed
it's
the
more
numbers to
like,
illustrate the
no,
math.
no,
Yeah.
but it's more along the lines of, rather than 50, we'd rather see 25, or rather
25.
than 40, we might want to see 20.
Yeah.
Right. And in that time, in that scale, it may work really well for patients. And depending on the area that you're in, you may be in endodontics and you need to see exams to diagnose, but then you need periods of time to be able to treat, right? And
Right.
so some of the procedures that we do, different types of care, if you're in surgery, a period of time and so forth might dictate that a little bit. But I'm
Hmm.
talking in the clinic when you're
Hmm.
seeing patients that are, quick primary care type patients.
Right. Right. So I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, he's talking about having, gaps throughout his day where there aren't any patients coming in. How could I possibly survive? That's not what David's saying. He's saying change the
No.
mix of patients and be able to spend more time. Like, the dry example, if you don't have any time to ask even a few questions of, so tell me about your day, let's try to figure out why your eyes are getting so dry. Oh, I stare
Yeah.
at my computer. Oh, do you stare at your computer? Okay, then, well, that's a different treatment option
Yeah.
than just regular old glasses. So that's the part that's
Right.
missing. Primary care, man, oh man, primary care, whether it's whatever it is, it's just it gets so squeezed, and it's so important. It's just another example of primary care. Well, different topic for another time, but getting kind of squeezed. So your primary care for the eye, right? So primary care for whatever part of the body it is. And here we go, squeezed again. So you start to realize, all right, the patient mix we have is not what we want. We can't give the care that we want. They're not listening to. It's not what we want. So, and you start to realize what we want is this subset of patients who walk in that you're noticing the difference between those that take your advice and take it seriously versus those that want to check a box. What did you start to do to shift, the 80/20 versus 20/80?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we did is in our practice, we have the option of having our patients do retinal photography as opposed to dilating the eyes. And most people have had their eyes dilated and they don't like the experience. And so we do retinal photography, which gives us arguably a better long-term view of the eye because we have a photo of it. So
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those examples where we looked, and about 90% of our patients were choosing the photograph, and about 10% of the people were not choosing the photograph. And then we started asking, like, well, what are those 10%? And what we found is those 10% never did anything extra. They never were buying their contact lenses from us. They were never going to our optical to buy glasses from us. And oftentimes they wouldn't return for any other type of encounter when we saw a problem for them. And so we just said, well, this is something that's really difficult. And so we decided to make this recommendation for a photograph almost a requirement. And there were some patients who literally could not afford it. And so we just said, yeah, we'll do it for free. Dr. Kading will pay for it. But for everybody else, we said, our doctors do a photo. Your insurance discounts the photo, or your insurance doesn't cover it, depending on how that was. And it just created a gap. It was a barrier to entry that patients had to realize that, hey, this doctor does something extra. They go above, and it's going to cost me. Realizing that when they come in for our care, we're going to go above and beyond for them. And oftentimes the procedures or the recommendations may cost them a little bit extra than maybe what they would have got at another eye care facility or another primary care. And that allowed the patient to see of, oh, am I willing to go above and beyond for myself? And is this something so that's self-selected out a large group of patients. And,
So you said
we're some.
you said 90% chose the photography option and 10% did not. Is
Yep.
that
So that just got it whittled down that 10% of
mhm.
the people who they didn't want to do anything else that we were offering. So it just reduced that 10% down.
Okay. So now, so So that got rid of that self-selected out a small
Yep.
fraction of patients, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, from there, we have various different specialties within our clinic, why we're called Specialty Eye. And the specialties in our clinic are built upon four pillars. These are the patients that we want to see a ton of. And that is dry eye patients, patients who need custom designed contact lenses, individuals who are progressing in their nearsightedness and we can slow it down or stop it. And that's particularly with children. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
individuals who their eyes and their brain don't work well together. Maybe they had a concussion or an injury, or children who have vision related learning problems. We call that binocular vision. So, those are the four categories that we build our practice upon. We do still see some primary care, but many of those patients have some of those other issues and we see them for other primary care. So we've gone out to the community and talked to other doctors and said, hey, if you have these patients, we'd love to see them. We've done marketing to stay out in the world of social media and SEO and various different forms of marketing. Hey, if you're somebody that deals with these are things that we're world class at. This is why we exist on the planet, is to serve people who have these needs. And that has further selected out. And I would say now our practice is somewhere around 40% primary care, where we see people who, have any of those other issues. But then about 50 to 60% of our day is spent just on the specialty that we really want to see.
Right, right. So, okay, so to go back, so the photography versus dilation, that was the beginning of you. That was
That
maybe
was a
like
start.
the start of, wait, we figured out a way to try to attract more of the patients we want and select out, or gently
Yeah.
guide away from the practice those that we do not. And then you continued from there. So, in
Yes.
between that beginning and where you are today, was there like another major step or two that kept the progress going?
Yeah, I think that it was a somewhat of an evolution of realizing that this is who we love to see. When we get up in the morning, that's who we get up for. When we go to bed at night, we feel most gratified when we've encountered those patients. So, how do we go about seeing more of them? And
Mm-hmm.
the biggest way, Carl, is shouting to the world, right? Is marketing and realizing that marketing for a lot of people is like, let's see if we can get our doors open wider and catch way more people, right? But the reality is that we wanted to say, how can we selectively invite a lot of people that have
Mm-hmm.
the conditions that we feel we're world class at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in general medicine, that might be somebody who's a dermatologist, but even within dermatology, there may be specific things that
Yep.
somebody wants to see,
Yep.
right? And in various different forms of medicine, you may have a subspecialty, but then within that subspecialty, do you even have certain areas? A
Mm-hmm.
friend of mine, she is a somewhat recent graduate in the naturopathic world, and she specializes in gut issues. And she started
Okay.
her private primary care practice by buying somebody else's that was a naturopathic clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw all different naturopathic types of patients. And she's doing this very thing right now is she's saying, how do I line my schedule to just see the patients that I want to see? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're far more satisfied in life when we're doing what we want to do and seeing the patients that we want to see and helping the patients that we're really good at.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot in there. One is, so if you're listeners, if you're wondering, do I have to say no to anybody? No, you don't. You just have to say, come on in and yes, over and over and over again to those that you do want to see more. And it's just like building a reputation in any other way. If you met somebody new for the first time and they said, my name is Carl White and I'm really good at X, would you believe them? And the answer is probably no, because you just met them. But once you hear it over and over and over again, and you see other signals of trust and reassurance and reputation, you start to believe it. And there's a principle of marketing, which is, there's many of them, but one of them is you got to be consistent with what you do. And so if you're going to pick something, you have to do it over and over and over again forever, kind of sort of forever. It's not a start stop proposition. So I'm curious, how long after, it's not like a calendar question or anything, but about how long after you started shouting to the world, these 4 or 5 types of patients are who we really want to see more of, did you start to notice those types of patients walking in the door more?
Yeah, so I would say probably within 2 or 3 years of starting to do that, we overtook a practice um, that was a primary care practice, and within 3 years, we had nearly doubled the revenue of the practice without seeing any more primary care than the other doctor was doing when we took over the practice.
Hmm.
And that just kind of goes to show that we were increasing our revenue per patient. And the large way that we were doing it was by bringing in our specialties.
Yeah.
And so we were reducing, we actually brought two doctors into his single doctor practice. We brought in specialty care. And then, our practice has just continued to grow in that area. As it's time for us to bring in new doctors, we ask them, what do you love to do?
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
can we help you to be the best at that you can do? And sometimes these doctors are a little bit younger and they've done a residency and specialized in a certain area. And so they may actually want to do a little bit more and they don't know where to really isolate it. So we
Hmm.
open that up to them. But then every year we're like, are you still satisfied? Is this still an area that you want to grow in?
Yes.
And they may back off in an area and say, hey, that may not be something I really love to do as much. And so we subvert that into somebody else's practice in there, or we start referring those patients to somebody else who really loves to do it.
Right. Excellent. 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 So after a couple of years, and there it is, that's why you have to be repetitive and be consistent, because the day after you decide what you want to do is not the day the patients beat down the door to come in. They don't know it yet. You've got to be very consistent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
I
So,
would I would mention one other
yeah.
aspect of that is it to just repeat something you said is the repetition is really critical. Somebody might say, hey, I sent out a notification that we had a new doctor in our practice, or I sent out a notification to other doctors in the area that I specialize in this. Great. There's a reason why you see the Nike swoosh over and over
Yeah.
and over
Now
and
go do
over
it
again,
15 more
right?
times and then tell me. Yeah.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
have to be repetitive. You have to make it known that
Hmm.
you do those sort of things. The best thing that happens is when two doctors are speaking and
Hmm.
one of them mentions to the other one how well you took care of a patient, right?
Yeah.
And so it just starts to spread and it snowballs. And really what you do is you have to start a snowball down a hill and then run ahead and add some more snow to it. And
Yeah.
it'll take a while, but
Yeah.
it'll eventually get going and get going on its own with that word of mouth spreading,
Yeah.
right? And you just have to take really good care of patients. And if they've been referred to you for a specialty, make sure to send them back to their primary care provider with an incredible message.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we hit our couple of wrap up questions, one other point to make: with consistency comes some choices. So when you talk about, go to referring providers and talk to them, you know what, pick three or pick a number that's manageable that you can hit consistently, rather than say pick 15 that you can't keep up with, because you're going to get frustrated. You're not going to get anywhere. And eventually with time, you can add more. So when you're thinking about consistency in your marketing, pick fewer things and do them well consistently, rather than trying to, spray and pray the landscape. Um,
Yeah.
so, David, with our topic here and our conversation, is there anything you think that any final points you want to make? Anything I should have
Yeah.
asked you but didn't?
Well, Carl, I think that in today's world, it's very different than 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I started in this, in that, social marketing back then was me going and having a cup of coffee and having a lunch. And those are critical things to do today,
Hmm.
but just as important is for us to reach out through the Internet of Things. And I really do think that people do a really poor job with their online marketing today. And
Hmm.
I've teamed up with you're
What we
laughing
do,
because
because yeah,
that's what you do.
a little biased,
But
yeah.
it's important for us to team up with individuals like you. And I've got a social media and a website company that I work with. And
Hmm.
I meet with my marketing person in that company on a monthly basis. And I say, hey, this is what I want. Help me get there. Right.
Hmm.
And I pay for it. right? I looked at the rest of the year. We're recording this, and we've got several months left in the year or in the quarter or a time period, whenever you're listening to this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't where I wanted to be. And so for the rest of this year, I have set up what I want to accomplish, the number of patients in a certain discipline that I want more of. And so I went to my marketing agency and I said, hey, I want this many more patients. This is, and to me, this is going to generate this much more revenue with those new patients. And so what's it going to take for you to get me those people? And so I laid it out for them. And I think it's really critical for us to go and look at our website. If your website has not had an update in the last month, it's old. Google doesn't notice your website
Yeah.
anymore.
It's sad,
So
isn't it?
you have to have something that is constantly driving people to your website so that you can stand apart as being an expert in the field that you're trying to grow in. And then your social media is just branding, right? That's the Nike swoosh. The
Hmm.
social media isn't always there to just teach people a ton of stuff, but it's that hook that drives people back to your website.
Hmm.
And Carl, I know you could speak for hours on this information, but I think that if people have not updated their website and got a new website in the last 2 years, it's old, and you
Yeah.
got to always be paying for what you want.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of it. I want to grow my practice in a certain way. I'm willing to make the investment into it. I think that's something a lot of people might not be willing to do or might not know to do, but it really can make a
Or it's
difference.
hard for them to wrap their head around investment payoff rather than cost. It's a difference.
Yeah.
It's a
Well, let
difference.
me speak to that just a second.
Okay.
So let's just say, and we'll use some weird numbers. I don't know what procedures are for different people, but just randomly, let's say that there's a patient who over the course of over the next year is going to generate you $1,000 over the course of a year, or even $500, right? Over the course of 3 years, that patient is going to generate you $3,000,
Hmm.
right? And if I could hand you something that's going to make you $3,000, what would you pay me for that?
Right.
Right? That's the way we need to be thinking about marketing.
Yeah.
Some patients aren't going to come back the second or third year, and you can do that attrition rates in an Excel document very easily. But
Yeah.
if you knew that somebody was going to generate you $500 or $1,000 or $250 over the course of 3 year time period, what would you pay for that?
Yeah.
And that's where you get your marketing from, right? They're
Hmm.
driving those patients into your practice, and you should grow the practice in the area that you want to, so that you
Yeah.
have a more satisfied and enjoyable life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and one final wrap up question. For those who are listening, we've caught their attention. Is there one or two tangible steps you'd recommend they take to get started on changing the mix of patients that they get to what they really want?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think that there's a great book that's called Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And it talks about how when you do things around your why, you do them far better. For me, it's
Mhm.
enriching people's lives so they can succeed to their greatest potential. I know that. At the end of the day, when I've done that, it's been a good day. What are the things that help you get to that? Because those are things that you're really good at, you're
Mhm.
passionate about, and that you're changing the world because you do.
Mhm.
Write those down, right? If you're, whatever area of healthcare you're in, write down the types of patients that you saw today or yesterday or the day before that
Mhm.
enriched you the best, right? And then how can you get more of those patients? Like, what would your day look like if you were seeing more of those people? And then I would say, find your marketing agency and say, help me find more of those people.
Yeah.
Call them up, just schedule a phone call and say, I need more of this. What do I know how to do to get there?
Yeah. And they're out there. Don't tell yourself that they're not out there. And the Simon Sinek, it's a great book. If you want to get a taste of it, go to YouTube and search for Simon Sinek Golden Circle. And it's like about an 18-minute video of him. It's fantastic. So excellent. David, once again, thanks for carving out some time to come on Practice Care. We're going to put all the contact information that you gave us in the show notes. Please also, I want to get your podcasts. I want to put them in there as well in case anybody wants to subscribe. And a couple of points before we finish up. First, if you've got an experience with the business side of your practice, like David does, and you own a practice, or you're someone like me who serves private practices, and we want you to come on PracticeCare so that you can share your experience and help private practices stay private. In the show notes, there's a link to a quick form. Just fill it out. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And then finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to PracticeCare on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much. And until next time.